I'm Jessica Spangler with Holistic Approach Piano Studio. I live and teach in the Metro Detroit area of Michigan. This video is about a topic very near and dear to my heart, and that is the topic of students with special needs. And it's kind of actually geared toward maybe my fellow teachers who might feel unsure about venturing into what might be unknown territory for them by taking these students. I know many teachers are apprehensive when they feel unequipped to take students with diagnoses that they might be inexperienced with. So I want to encourage you and hopefully give you some confidence not to feel that way. Sure, there are experts in this field or any field, but really their education and qualifications are kind of subjective because there are as many individual situations as there are individuals, and there are many schools of thought that even conflict about how to teach people. And so at the end of the day, not every student would even have access to specialized programs like that due to location or cost. So do we have to turn down students that want to make music just because we're not a therapist? And I emphatically say absolutely not. Now, I do happen to have a child with disabilities of my own, but even before I had him, I had some experience teaching students with special needs. And over the last 16 years or so, I have had the privilege of making music with students with a variety of challenges due to Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, varying degrees of autism. But this doesn't prove that you need my experience. I want to prove that you develop it by doing it. The most important thing I want people to know is that you don't need to be intimidated by a fear that you need to solve physical or cognitive challenges your students have. They have their own doctors and therapists that help them reach goals for daily living. Your job is simply to observe what are they capable of now and think creatively to get them to the very next level. So I like to share just a couple of practical tips so that you can serve students of all capabilities in your studio. I have no special degree or certification that qualifies me to teach people with disabilities, but what does qualify me and what qualifies you is simply the willingness to want to work with anyone of any ability, offer them music if they want to participate in it. Let me repeat that. What qualifies you to teach people with disabilities is the willingness to offer them music regardless of their ability level or what you think their potential is. As a parent of a child with significant challenges, I want to start by covering just a few things I think are very important when interacting with people who are disabled or struggling with any sort of challenge. And maybe you know some of these things, but maybe some of you don't. First of all, always speak to the child or student and not over them as though they're not there. Even if they cannot hear you or even if they cannot respond to you, give them the respect of engaging them and giving them the chance to respond in the way that they are capable. And perhaps they'll require a significant amount of time, or they have a caretaker that communicates on their behalf, but always still look at them and give them the chance to try. Second, feel free to ask tactful questions. As parents, and I've heard even as the individuals who have a disability, we prefer that you do. It's actually more risky to make assumptions about what they can and can't do. And so we welcome the opportunity in most cases to have open dialogue about what the challenges are and how do we address them in their musical journey. So an interview call or interview lesson is really critical here. It helps you to identify exactly where the student is with fine motor skills, gross motor skills, cognitive development, any behavioral issues, tolerance of sensory input or distraction around your studio, what is their attention span for different activities. Sometimes if you don't know what questions to ask, just begin an assessment like you would with any of your students and the issues might present themselves. So don't hesitate to ask things like, oh, I see that maybe it is a challenge for you to isolate your fingers. Show me about that, or tell me about that. Or, are the cars going down the street really too noisy for you today? Let's close the curtain. Etc. I really think that you'll find, rather than being offended, the student or his parents will appreciate that you want to better understand them so that you can serve them better. Third, there is a controversial issue with a couple schools of thought surrounding language used to describe people with special needs. For years, it has been ingrained in us to use person-first language, which means you say the person first, or their name first, and then include their diagnoses to describe them. And that helps not insinuate that the person is identified by their disability. Obviously, we know it isn't respectful to say that cerebral palsy kid or that Down syndrome kid, and we would never do that, but we do that with other things, that special needs kid, that disabled kid. And so, we want to make sure we know that they're a person first who happens to have a diagnosis. But the problem with this is there are many in the community that find saying person who has autism even more derogatory. They believe that it creates more of a stigma by trying to separate the person from their disability and makes it something to be ashamed of, and we don't want to do that either. So I'm not going to tell you how to address people, but I don't believe we should have to walk on eggshells around people because we aren't born innately knowing how they would like to be addressed. So I guess I recommend just being conscientious of the issue and asking them how they describe themselves. They'll probably be happy to give you their opinion. With all that said, I really want to get to the heart of this video, which was meant to be more about simple techniques I found useful in my own personal experience. So let's start with students with physical disabilities, maybe tonal issues, motor planning, limited mobility, etc. Through years of going to physical therapy and occupational therapy with my son, I've learned a lot about bones and muscle communication and sensory systems and proprioception, but to be honest, a lot of it is still way over my head. That's just not my area of expertise. I know enough to help him do his exercises at home, and some of that I've been able to translate into helping my students. I've learned that a lot of times the very large muscle groups are easier to use at first, and you got to get them coordinated and in working order and strong before you ask the fine muscle groups to work. So a student with very poor core strength and postural control is going to have trouble using their hands. And even if they can use their hands, they might have trouble isolating their fingers. So something that I found helpful was to use hand clusters. Still work on maybe giving them the best arc that they can have, the best little dome. Use a prop if you need to, but it's okay. Let them be clustered. Let them work on playing little note clusters and work on large movements, large jumps, leaps. There is so much that you can do on the keyboard, just patterning on the black keys and moving up and down, trying hands together, moving apart, moving together. You can do stuff on and off the keyboard using large muscle groups. Do some whole body movement or some stepping or whatever their ability level is to wake things up, and then you might find it's a little easier for them to begin to call on those fine muscle groups. And you can gradually have them put emphasis on one of their fingers over the others. Gradually have them shoot for using that index finger while their hands in a cluster. Eventually they might find some awareness of that and be able to see what that feels like to use. Through these patterns, you can explore dynamics, articulation, even telling a story as they compose a piece. Crossing over the body is a very beneficial exercise. A book that I highly recommend is called Brain Gym, and it contains a ton of neat physical exercises that can be easily adapted to piano to help students cross midline, wake up their brain muscle communication, strengthen their muscles. You could easily use some of those in your studio. So there's plenty you can do with someone who is limited physically to help them enjoy making music. You just have to think outside the method book. Say you have a student who may have a developmental delay and will not be processing abstract concepts such as letters or numbers for a while. The first thing you need to do with that student is just work on telling the difference between two items. Okay, and there are so many contrasts in music that I love my students to play around with. You can play around with black versus white, high versus low, loud versus soft, long versus short, right versus left, twos versus threes, and so forth. You could fill a semester of lessons or more just by helping them get a solid foundation in these basics. And you wouldn't have wasted a single moment, because when they get to the book, they'll already understand so much that would have been a struggle otherwise. How about a student with visual perception issues? Again, no need for a book. Much can be learned kinesthetically using the topography of the piano. And for those that do have the capability to see, write out their music in giant print on a big piece of paper. Have them do it if capable. You know, in fact, with all my beginners, I teach songs kind of by rote to train their ear and have them write it down on big paper so that they make the connection of hearing it first and then understanding this is what it looks like on paper, what you heard. And we write it to share it and store it for later. That helps them understand why we're doing this. I never throw a grammar textbook at my babies to teach them how to talk, but so many piano teachers throw a method book at a child to teach them music, forgetting that they've already been making music probably their whole lives. And your job is just to show them the universal language of what it looks like so that we can share it with others. As for communication challenges due to physical disability or social apprehension, again, speak directly to the student in a calm voice at their sight level. Even if they can't make eye contact, that's okay, but don't talk at them, especially quickly, expecting that they are processing all of that. Give them ample time to answer and check frequently for comprehension. So let them respond and do what you ask. Do not go too fast and don't make assumptions. Lastly, and this goes for all students, being very patient. Do not track progress arbitrarily. Set really personalized goals based on the very next skill the student needs to learn. I don't care what their age or level is. Where they are is where they are, and you do the next right thing for them. Most of your students are not there for career development. And I mean, wonderful if they are, but most are there to have fun and to learn and to just participate in music because it really enriches their lives. And you can't hold them accountable to some method book timeline or a level standard if that does not mesh with their own goals. So the one-size-fits-all mentality and methods kind of ruin a love for learning, and our job is to feed their love for learning so that it goes with them the rest of their lives. So in summary, that was a very quick rundown of ideas. It's not an exhaustive list or training course by any means. You know, I'm no expert, but you don't have to be to work with people with varying abilities. You just have to be willing. If you have used creative techniques in your studio to meet your students' needs, feel free to share them. And if you have questions about techniques or taking on students with special needs, feel free to ask. Even if I don't know the answer, maybe someone else on here can help or point you in the right direction.